welcome to Spirits Podcast, episode 32, The Butterfly Lovers with Linda.
That's such a cute name for such a sad, sad story.
It is super sad. It's mad tragic.
It is really bad.
And it also has the benefit of being a myth that you didn't know the end of it.
No.
So it was really delightful to kind of watch you experience and guess, like I do every week, about what this myth actually is. So Linda did a great job.
Yes, Linda did amazing, and we're really excited for you to hear it. But first, we gotta take care of some stuff.
Housekeeping.
Yes, housekeeping. Let's look at the list.
So welcome first and foremost to our newest patrons, Chan, Olivia, Laura, Tristan, Amanda, not me, Madeline, John, Jessica, and Kimberly, and to MCF, who upgraded to be a $10 level patron. Thank you. And as always, to our supporting producer level patrons, Leanne Davis, Shannon Alford, Phil Fresh, Catherine Addington, Christina Rogers, and Griffin Meckelberg.
Our happiest butterfly people.
Yes, happy green butterflies and not sad white death butterflies.
Yes,
you'll see. Don't
ideally.
worry. You'll see.
If you haven't been following us on Twitter, we are now on Instagram and SoundCloud. If you listen to your podcast on SoundCloud, you can now listen to this thing right here on SoundCloud.
You can share the playlist with all our episodes to your friends. You can rock out. And on Sunday when we were playing D&D, #SpiritsD&D, with Julia Jake, Eric Silver, former guest, and Eric Schneider, podcast editor. It's just a whole family of Spirits D&D. We were putting the campaign live on Instagram stories. So you should go follow us over there at Spirits Podcast and see behind the scenes, our drinks, our setup, fan art, myths we love, all of it.
You're going to see some cool shit that you normally wouldn't see by this audio medium.
Multimedia magic.
Amanda, I want to talk about this week. What are we consuming? What are we enjoying? What's up? What
Stuff we like corner.
Yes.
So I am, number one, listening to our mutual friend Zach Valenti's new daily podcast.
It's so good, guys.
It is so good. Focused AF.
It's like
Focused
just getting to spend the day with Zach Valenti, and everyone should want to do that.
I mean, I want to do that every day.
Yes.
And I mean, the days that I do, it's amazing. But the days that I don't, I can listen to the podcast.
I know, it's really
He's doing
great.
a daily podcast, which is just amazing output, and B, he's actually really good at podcasting.
Oh, he is.
So it's, great audio, very cool. It's cool just like hear New York represented through someone else. I don't know, it's awesome. So that's my recommendation for this week.
Okay, cool. My recommendation for this week is a show on Sci-Fi Channel. It's also on Netflix, called Wynonna Earp.
How do you spell that?
WYNONNA space EARP.
Awesome.
And it's about
Roger.
It is Roger. It is a Roger. It is amazing. It is about a woman who turns 27 and a curse comes upon her. It's like Western and supernatural, and there's demon fighting, and there's a dude who's ageless, and it's amazing, and there's witches.
Whoa. I'm amazed that I'm only hearing about this right now.
It's really good, and there's like adorable bi people, and just like, oh god, it's so good, and like women owning up to their sexuality and not being slut shamed, and it's so great, and I love it so much.
That's all a girl wants.
And like also dealing with like PTSD and like really like impressive issues for a sci-fi show. It's
awesome.
One
of my favorite things about the show Elementary, which I am like such a huge fan of, is their like nuanced depiction of recovery and friendship and addiction and forgiveness and like boundaries, and just seeing healthy relationships and people just like dealing with their shit is one of my favorite things in media.
We had a great response to the past 2 weeks where we've done Myth Chat Monday, which is something we do on Twitter, and I extended it over to Facebook last week.
So again, if you're not following us at Spirits Podcast, what are you doing?
Yeah, guys, come on, what are you doing? But what I would love to do, because you guys inspired us with all your cool hometown urban legends.
Y'all have some creepy shit in your hometowns.
I love it. I want to do a hometown urban legends listener selection.
Yeah.
So what you guys can do is you can send us through our email, through our website, on Twitter DM, I guess, if you wanted to.
Or Facebook message.
Send us your stories, and we will read them in an awesome extra bonus episode or whatever.
Yeah, let us know if you want us to read your name or just refer to you anonymously or by your first name. But we have so many cool stories to share in our inboxes, and we are really, really excited. But we need enough of them to fill up a whole little bonus episode, so send them in.
Yes.
So without further ado, enjoy Spirits, episode 32, The Butterfly Lovers with Linda. Linda, thank you so much for joining us here on Spirits to tell us what is apparently going to be quite a depressing story about love.
You know, it's what I live for, to find happiness and puncture it wherever I possibly can.
Nice. Good.
I think that's why we're friends, so yeah. I really appreciate that. But what is the background to this story? Why is this something that you decided to bring to us today?
So the origins of this come in, I'm a first-generation immigrant. I was actually born in Shanghai in China. I lived there until I was about 3 before we immigrated to the U.S. And one of the things that always came up, I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, grits forever.
Grits forever.
Is like what kind of barbecue you like a question that is divisive? Is that what you
no,
ask
because
people?
there's only one correct answer.
See,
and
yes.
it's called Eastern Carolina vinegar-based barbecue.
So that's a yes.
Yeah. Everybody else is wrong. But it was always a really interesting exercise in talking about sort of your early cultural influences, like what stories you remember and what sorts of things you imprinted on as like a childish duckling.
Yeah.
And like a lot of my
All
friends...
children are ducklings. That's actually the key to child raising.
Of course, quack. But like while my friends were watching Cinderella and like getting a Belle ball gown and things like that, the very first story that I remember consuming as a kid, and we're talking about when I was 3 years old at maximum, sitting in front of a crummy television in our apartment in Shanghai, is from one of the classics of Chinese literature, The Dream of the Red Mansions. Now, don't worry, I'm like not smart. I'm still pretty illiterate. Sorry, Mom. Like I wasn't reading this book. I was watching the 1980s television series of this.
But that's how we take in our archetypes, right? Like the same sort of idea of like the, Hansel and Gretel or like the fated love or, Sleeping Beauty type things. It doesn't have to be the source material. It's just kind of the archetype that's told over and over again.
Yeah, the many, many interpretations of it. Like there have been dozens of probably films and attempts to tell this story, which is extremely sweeping. And it's about a wealthy family of imperial courtiers in classical China, right? Like during the Ming Dynasty, I think is when it is. Again, sorry, Mom.
I cannot fact check you.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
It's just, I'm shaming myself on this podcast some more. Again, it's about this massive family, all of their trials, tribulations, and scandals. And the very first memory of storytelling I have as a little kid is of watching the lead female character from this series dying in the snow under a plum tree, mourning her lost love, who is her cousin, who is her lost love, who is her lost love because he has been tricked into marrying their other cousin by their family, who has told him that he's marrying the girl of his dreams, who's just died under a plum tree.
Classic.
Cool.
So, and this whole story wraps up many, many chapters later with him running away to be a monk, the whole family collapsing, and several of his sisters becoming prostitutes.
Obviously.
Nice.
So, and before the people listening to this are like, actually, I am aware that the original author never finished the story, and that this...
Oh, did he like die before?
Yes.
Oh, man.
He ate it before he finished it, and somebody else sort of made up their own ending, and it has been only the most controversial thing in Chinese literature ever. There are probably people with like 15 PhDs writing about whether or not this ending is actually valid.
Yeah. I love that shit. That is my favorite thing in the entire world.
I love it because it is futile. Like, we'll never know. We will never know if Shakespeare actually authored the plays that he is said to have, or if he had collaborators for more than we think he did. Like, people will, like, get into fistfights over this stuff, and historians will, like, snark at each other in the footnotes of their monographs. And, like, that is the kind of stuff I live for.
I just find it really fascinating because as a person, I just don't understand that mentality. Like, okay, why does it matter? The story is the story.
Right.
Like, it doesn't... I just can't understand the academic pettiness over this.
You know what? I totally get that, though. I totally get the academic pettiness. I get the, like, desire for there to be more. Like, there was a really... I'm not going to say shitty book. It was an okay book called Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore. An okay book, but basically the idea was they were trying to solve this riddle of this guy who wrote down a book and trying to solve what it meant.
Yes.
Terrible ending, but
I thought it was a pretty entertaining book.
Okay.
So, with the pretty bad ending, I'm sorry, Women's Lone, please love us. But yes, the whole idea is like, it was like a cult of people almost that sprung up around like solving the mystery of a book.
Right, and that's like a real thing that people do. Like, I just heard about this thing. It's a book. It's called The Secret. It's not the one about visualization.
It's not about manifesting your dreams into reality?
No, it's not. So it's about this...
But what is the secret?
It's about this guy...
What is the secret?
This guy in 1987 created this book that was 12 or 13 photos and poetry that goes along with it.
Okay,
and
arty book.
basically, he puts out these photos and poetry are clues to these 12 or 13 boxes that I've hidden across North America. If you find the box, there's a key inside. If you bring the key to me, I will give you a jewel that is worth $10,000.
Back when you just published your address on the internet.
I mean, like, that's totally fine. I think you'd have to write in, like, with a photo of the thing, and then he would.
Oh, I thought you just like showed up at his doorstep.
No,
like, hey.
no.
What's up?
This really shows the differences in personality, because I'm mostly sitting here thinking, how many jewels worth $10,000?
So many jewels.
Can this person have?
So
Wow.
only 2 of the boxes have been
quite
found.
a large advance. Like,
Yes.
Yeah, so only 2 of the boxes have been found. The guy died in 2005 in a somewhat suspicious car crash out on Long Island. Yeah, he's from Long Island. Of course he is, because only crazy people come from Long Island. And so
it's like just learn German or something.
Right.
Yeah.
But this guy has created this online community of people who are still trying to find these boxes, and some of them are really close to being found. Some of them they have no idea, and it's just really cool. And it's all about that human idea that people are trying to solve mysteries even if they're not really there.
Yeah, and to leave mysteries to be solved, right? Like this guy, died 12 years ago, and still people are talking about him and trying to solve his puzzle. Pieces of his life's work are still like buried in the ground somewhere. I don't know. We try to achieve permanence by like messing with the order of the universe.
Yes, but I'm all about it.
I don't know. I think it's one of the more charming elements of humanity. Like, we cannot help these sort of idiosyncratic tendencies that we have, where we're like, this doesn't bother me, and then it's just going to bother you, and bother you, and bother you, and you just have to solve the question.
I know. Oh, there's so many good examples of that. I loved like early internet, text puzzles and
oh dear God,
cryptographic whatever.
All about that.
Or like the entire Reddit detective threads, right? Like anytime they decide to solve a mystery. I wasn't going to
say it because I just find them so pleasurable to read, but also it gets super destructive and creepy. So, take it with a grain of salt.
Also, FYI, everyone listening to this, the first 2 seasons of Unsolved Mysteries is now on Amazon Prime. Knock yourselves out, kiddos.
Tip from me to you.
There's actually a lot of really beautiful imagery associated with her, like very early on in the story, and she's like 14 at this age. She's like burying plum blossoms that have fallen, where she talks about how tragic it is and how fleeting beauty and youth are.
It's a metaphor.
Yeah, and she just mourns it. Anyway, she eats it at 16.
Oh,
classic Chinese. That's what we do.
Well, Juliet was also like 12 or something.
I know, it's really upsetting. I try not to.
The second someone told me that, I was like, oh no, why'd you go and do that?
Yeah, I know. Like, I don't like this anymore.
Or like Amanda and I just went to see Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, and they're like, oh, she's 16. I'm like, why? Why is this thing happening?
It's a musical about like War and Peace and a woman who is betrothed and like has her first like feeling of sexuality, right? And it's like, oh no, and then like,
just fucks everything.
A like married courtier like takes advantage of her, and anyway, it's classic like Russian tragedy,
of course.
But yeah, why? I don't know. At 15, I was like painting my nails blue. I wasn't like a tragic nymph dying for true love.
I don't know. I feel like at 15 was around the age I spent a year convinced I was a lesbian because I was so into Dana Scully.
We've all been there.
Like,
we've
everyone
all
is
been
there. Yeah.
If I had known the X-Files before 21, that too would have been my fate.
I was like, I remember really distinctly watching a number of episodes, and I was like, well, I guess I'm gay. Like, she's definitely the best part of the show, and I'm obsessed now. With her.
Yeah, and it's just, she's so good.
I know, and I spend all day fantasizing about how pretty she is.
Even
this
the
just
bad
makes sense.
With
those shoulder pads.
Big shoulder pads,
man. It's such an aggressive look.
On the other hand, like, everyone wants those shoulder pads to be off of you. Like, let's just get you out of those shoulder pads, hon. Like, that works out best for everybody.
Oh my God. Okay, speaking of love.
Good transition. Go ahead.
Good transition, right? Smooth.
Love, plums, and shoulder pads.
That's right.
Spirits Podcast.
So speaking of love, the actual story I ended up deciding that I would come here and tell is probably the most famous Chinese love story of all time.
Nice.
And it hilariously has very little Western footprint at all.
Good.
So this is called Liangzu in Chinese, which is the surnames of the 2 characters in question. And it's probably more famously known as the Butterfly Lovers, which is actually the name of a piece of music that was composed about their tragic love story afterward. Obviously, it was tragic.
I was going to say, it sounds like a Coldplay song.
Sounds tragic AF.
Yeah, and the other really interesting thing about this story is that it forms like a template for a lot of things that you will see in Asian storytelling, particularly in Chinese storytelling, in even modern day things. And you'll just like listen to the story and go down a checklist of like, yep, cross-dressing, weirdness, terrible families, death, like all of this stuff comes up.
Yeah, like awesome. you listen to a story at the beginning, you're like, well, I guess we're not done yet because we haven't gotten to the cross-dressing.
I know, like obsessive tiger mom focus on education. Yeah, it's already here. So, just to get us started, our lead characters are Zu Yingtai, which is our girl, so we'll call her Yingtai for the course of the story. Cool. And our dude is named Liang Sanbo, and we'll just call him Sanbo. So, the background is Zu Yingtai is actually the daughter of an extremely wealthy family.
Sounds like she has a lot to lose.
Sounds like it. She's the daughter of an extremely wealthy family, but her mother is extremely well educated, and she wants the same for her daughter. And also, if she's going to be anybody's wife, she needs to be a very erudite one. So the only way, of course, to get her sort of beyond the traditional female education of like some poetry and embroidery and things like that.
Let me guess, cross-dressing?
Yes.
Yes.
So her mom binds her breasts, teaches her how to dress up like a boy, and they send her off to like a boys' school, and she lives as a man for several years studying there. Now, while she is at this school, she meets Liang Sanbo, who is actually the poor scholarship student. Yes. Like, he is there on merit alone, and
you were just like
so
checking
excited.
off every like part of, if I was writing fan fiction, this would be what I would be writing about.
I mean, just wait for it. So, poor scholarship boy, and the two of them form this tremendous friendship. Now, there are different versions of how this goes. Some stories some versions of the story say that he figured out Zu Yingtai was actually a girl earlier on, before she ever left the school.
It wasn't gay, guys. Don't worry, it wasn't gay.
Yeah. And other versions say that he didn't realize until later when he decided to pay a visit to her family. But either way, the two of them fall passionately in love. So the challenge here is the following. He is dirt poor and a nobody, and she, because of both birth and her family's aspirations, is really fated for a very high level marriage to which that he can never aspire to. So one of the things that's also important to know for the context of this story is that China was one of the first countries in the world that had a civil service exam.
Yeah,
so
it was.
Even though
fucking administrated so well.
Amanda remembers that from world history, and that's about it.
I do.
Nerd shit for life. So
the paperwork is always what got me.
It's real good. It's real good.
The war is like, whatever. Get back to the paperwork. I love it.
So even if Sanbo was dirt poor and came from nothing, he could test into the bureaucracy and eventually hold ever higher levels of power within the government, based solely on his wits. So his plan was that he was going to take the civil service exam and place really high.
Then I assume that he doesn't, because you said that's what his plan was.
Well, he's going to place really high, and then he's going to take his newly acquired bureaucratic status and the promise of future advancement, and then go to her family and ask for her hand in marriage.
Makes sense.
Good so the version that I always grew up with was they discussed this was their plan. So after Yingtai had been taken home by her family, so the plan was that he was going to take this exam and he was going to score really high, he was going to become a high-level bureaucrat, and then he was going to go to her family and ask for her hand in marriage. After Yingtai gets taken home by her family, she's awaiting his arrival, and he's going home to study for this test.
Sounds like something go real wrong.
Something's gonna go wrong. The family's going... I want to take a guess. The family is going to have someone waiting for her to get married to before he's able to take
Hitch her
test.
before he can get in.
Yes! So... When she gets home, the family already has someone in mind, obviously, that they would like her to marry. And she is ardently against this, right? She is very upfront saying that, like, she has fallen in love with someone else, that he is taking the exam right now. He's going to be the top scorer, and then he'll be a bureaucrat, and he'll be totally worthy of her. Screw you guys, I'm gonna marry my boyfriend.
Also, like, it must have been so trippy having lived as a man for several years and, like, enjoying that male privilege. Like, like having your opinion count for stuff, you know? You can't just step back from that.
It's a little bit different than that. So I would say that she did enjoy male privilege while she was living as a man, but I don't know if her opinion counted for much, because the way that tutelage happened in, like, the school is very much the same way that Chinese schools still run today, where it's like a lot of memorization and people are mean to you.
Yes.
Gotcha. So she just, like, the card to enter was just the
I mean,
dress.
but she was also away from home, right? You have to understand that, like, these daughters of really wealthy households oftentimes never left the curated gardens of their homes.
Yeah.
So she not only saw the world, she saw the world unfettered by her family, and she couldn't be monitored, you know? She didn't have to embroider anything for years.
Amazing.
Just skipped on those embroidery lessons altogether.
She got to like
Learn
wear
arithmetic
pants.
instead.
I don't know. Lots of things.
God, wearing pants, man.
Just every day I put on my pants, I go, thank you, foremothers.
Yes, exactly. So she's sitting there fighting the good fight, trying to like hold out on this relationship while he's taking the exam. And of course, he scores really high. He gets a great posting. But when he brings his meager bride gift to the family to try and make his appeal, her family is like, no effing thank you. And basically run him out of town and throw him into a ditch and have a bunch of people beat the crap out of him.
Damn, son, that's violent. Just say no.
That's
just
a no and don't come back.
I know, it's very rude. So he eventually gets, you know, like collected out of his ditch and dragged back home.
Well, that's nice.
Dragged back home, but he's basically destroyed as a person. Like, he's very injured, he's heartbroken. And she's also furious because obviously she knows that they've hurt her true love, and her family doesn't care at this point. They're like, he's out of the way. We've agreed to this marriage contract with this other wealthy person, so we are going to make this happen. And while she's still trying to fight this as much as she can and hold out, he unfortunately gets an infection and dies from his injuries. Yeah, dies of his injuries, and his poor mother, who is the only surviving member of his family, already widowed, only son. I know, just to like twist the knife a little, buries him. Now, traditional Chinese, to give you some a visual on this, traditional Chinese burials are not like a flat grave or a mausoleum. They typically do a mound burial. So it's like a giant mound of earth, and there'll be like a little concrete board like right in front of it with the name and where you can leave offerings and things like that. So when Yingtai hears this, she's obviously completely heartbroken. She starts crying. She doesn't stop crying. So during this point, her parents are like, whatever, her guy is dead, so let's start preparing the marriage. So all throughout the process...
Don't mind the crying bride in the corner.
Like, be a little upset for her, please.
So all the while, she's crying. They're doing the marital preparations. And her mother at this point is starting to feel a little bit of guilt about the way this entire situation has gone down. And she basically says to her daughter, you know, the night before they're about to send off her wedding pelican to her new husband, like...
Wait, I'm sorry, what was that word
wedding
you just
pelican?
Because that's what I heard. I heard wedding pelican. I'm like, I'm sorry, is this like a thing that I don't know?
Yeah, we just like stick a girl in the mouth. And
no, I was like, oh, okay, so like the wedding gifts have to be small enough to fit in a pelican's mouth. I guess that makes sense.
The wedding pelican.
Okay,
pelican. A wedding pelican.
Just to clarify.
What is that?
It's gosh, you know what? That's a really interesting question that I don't know how to explain. It's basically, in Chinese it's called a jiaozi, but it's like a man-powered, like, just
like litter?
It's like a litter, but it's like you have a little booth. Like, you sit inside of a little booth, and there's like two, like, so 4 guys carry you.
Okay,
right.
yeah. That probably actually is the word for it, but I just never knew that before.
I mean, it's a very fancy version of a litter.
I just remembered why I knew that word, and it's because of Steven Universe, and we can move on now.
We must not have gotten there yet in our rewatch.
No, we haven't. It was like one of the most recent episodes. It's good. Okay, sorry.
Right. So they're getting ready to send her off on her wedding pelican soon. They're like, how can we make you stop crying? Like, yeah, I feel sort of bad that...
Bring back my love.
As a consequence of my choices, you are suffering. So Yingtai agrees. She basically says, like, look, I will consent to this marriage, but my last request is this. On the way to my new husband's home, I want the wedding pelican to go past Sambo's grave, because I want to burn some money for him, and I want to say my last respects.
Julia's shaking her head vociferously.
Nope.
Knows that this is a bad idea.
Just bad.
Just close the wound. Close the door.
She's so narratively intelligent.
God.
This is what she's here for.
That is what I'm here for.
You just know.
I'm here to mishear words and make jokes about them.
To be fair, I did interrupt with pelican first.
I'm glad
it wasn't just you.
I think you saw me go, what? They have wedding pelicans?
Both important skills.
How good would that be?
I mean, the best part of this is I don't actually know whether or not pelicans are native to China at all.
I don't know that either. I will Google it later.
We'll put it in the show notes. So her mother agrees. She thinks this is fine enough. We'll do this. And so the wedding procession goes. On the day of the procession, she comes out of the wedding palanquin. And Chinese weddings, you don't wear white, you wear red. It's because there once was a really greedy god who liked to steal all the hot chicks on their wedding day, and the only color that he can't see through is red.
Love it.
That's wonderful. I love it. I dig it.
It's fantastic. When
if
you
only
see,
there was like a style of clothing that Zeus didn't like,
I know.
you know, so he could
Zeus just liked women.
and
Yeah.
suddenly like
And some
pantaloons
guys.
And some guys.
spread
And
across.
well, Zeus is like can't stop, won't stop when it comes to
I
hitting.
know.
Oh, it's
I
just
love
like,
it. I love it.
I'm a swan now, let's fuck.
I'm a swan, I'm a bull, let me pee on you. Like, let's just make it all happen, guys.
It wasn't let me pee on you, to be fair. He was literally a golden shower. Is
that better or is that worse?
It's not better, but at least it's not urine.
That's what you think.
I mean, yeah.
So our main girl is wearing red, and she's not married yet, right? Like
No,
she's on her
she's
way to
on
be
the way
married.
to the
This is like her taking the limo to the church,
Yeah.
but stopped at
the
a
limo
at
or
the graveyard
first.
on the way to the
just,
church.
Just your quick little stop off at the graveyard.
Yeah, this
You
is
guys
like
don't
a
do
really
that, no?
interesting mental image that you're creating here where like this girl climbs out of a bird's mouth. Like in a
Or
ranch.
she's riding it, and all the stuff, like her like wedding. What do you call that? The
her trousseau, I guess.
like the chest of important things.
oh,
her
your
dowry
hope
The
chest?
dowry, yeah,
Yeah.
like the dowry chest or the hope chest is like in the pelican's mouth.
Nice.
Anyway, that's just me.
This is some serious Studio Ghibli shit happening right now.
my
listen,
God.
my brain spins this shit out immediately.
all
upon
gold.
Mishearing it.
It's all gold. It's all gold.
However, the kind of like visiting the graveyard on the way to a happy thing, my family does all the time. Like my grandparents on my Irish side are buried in like in like this side in the town where all my cousins and aunts and uncles have gotten married, and like all the cousins have been baptized and their kids have been christened, whatever. It's
the most
and so,
Irish
like,
thing you've
and
ever
so
done.
and so on the way to the wedding or the baptism, you just stop off at the graveyard, say hi to grandma and grandpa, trim the shrub, and continue on your way.
shrub in your wedding dress or tux.
Do you like
Yeah.
pause, commemorate a potato famine? Like what is just like, this is amazing.
No, they died after just fleeing like economic depression.
Oh, okay, that's different.
Like you do.
But you know, you just stop off, say hi, go. And I didn't realize it was a weird thing until this moment.
Yeah, it's a
It's,
little
you know,
weird.
it's not weird. It's eccentric.
I can't remember the last time I went to a graveyard, like with a specific
You should come with me
purpose.
next time.
No,
we have a
thank
baptism
you.
coming up soon.
They make me real awkward.
How do I respond to this? Anyways,
Anyway,
Yeah, like
anyway.
so she climbs out of her wedding palanquin. She's in front of the burial mound of her best beloved,
Oh,
and
God.
she's still wearing all the red of her wedding. But in China, whereas red is the color that you wear to get married, white is actually the color of mourning. So she pulls off her red veil, and she pulls off the red overcoat of her wedding gown, and she's wearing all white in full mourning underneath.
Yes.
And she runs out to the grave where everyone thinks she's just going to be burning some paper money so that he has it in the afterlife or whatever.
Oh no, does she throw
Nope,
herself
nope,
on the grave and kill herself?
No, she doesn't, because
Oh.
this is China and we is extra TM. So instead, the grave opens.
Oh yes!
And she throws herself into it and it closes behind her.
All about that. That is so good.
And the version of the story that I grew up with is that there was no trace of her. Like the grave consumed her so that she could be with her love. And that their souls turned into a pair of butterflies and that they flitted off together.
I'm so
Yes.
about this story.
I love that. And I love stories where like the elemental forces are on our
Yes.
hero's side.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that's really interesting where, yes, it's a very human story, obviously, but it also has this underlying, elemental is really a good way to say it, like an elemental mysticism, because there's not really going to be the intervention of a specific god or goddess. It's just that the forces of karmic fate are going to be aware that some things need to be righted. And so, like, this is one of the very first love stories that I grew up consuming, and that
Sounds like very realistic expectations for you.
I know. I mean,
Yeah.
like, if I don't find a man who is willing to get the shit beaten out of him by my family and then have a grave that will consume me so we can be together forever, it is just
Not
not
gonna work.
worth it.
Also, let's
Not
just
gonna work out.
observe her epic, like, day to night transition of the, like, wedding
Yes.
finery to, like, dying in
Funeral
this dress to
outfit.
haunt you thereafter.
Yeah.
So good.
She's turned up to 11.
She is.
She is.
Yeah.
The story is turned up to 11. Let's be real
I
here.
love it.
Yeah.
It would have been 12 if there were pelicans. It would have been 12 if there were pelicans.
So this is one of those stories that's very similar to like Romeo and Juliet has in terms of Western canon, where you can see echoes of it in everything, but it's also been reinterpreted in a million different ways. There was like a movie made in Hong Kong in like the 90s, which is what I grew up watching a lot of. There have been other movies made subsequently. There have been television series. It's been told 1.5 million times, and it's always this this template story about a sheltered girl who, freed from the confines of her female requirements, falls in love with someone. And it's always this like, there's always this weird sort of subtext of like, it's not gay because she's actually a girl. But it's also interesting,
It's my favorite of all subtexts.
But it's also really interesting, right? That like, that education plays such a fundamental role in this. And also the loss of your female requirements, like the loss of like the rules around being a woman is what actually let her fall so passionately in love, and that they developed this abiding relationship when, sexual love may or may not have even been part of the initial
so
conversation.
strong and so pure, right? And so worth waiting for. And there's also some element of like freed from expectation.
Yes.
The bonds that you make and the things that you discover are so much like purer and stronger.
Yeah.
Because like they wouldn't have been in the same room together if, there wasn't some scholarship for him to get into that room where he wasn't supposed to be. And if she hadn't, elaborately fooled the system to get into a room where she also wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah. And I think but what fundamentally brings it back down to the very sort of like depressingly earthy Chinese interpretation of things is that even though like at no point in the story do you think that their love is foolish or misguided, like you feel for them, like these two people are genuinely in love, but that doesn't change the fundamental reality that they can never be together on this earthly plane. Like he is not meant for her, she is not meant for him. There was no way it was ever going to happen, but they do find a way to be together, and it is in death.
Just not on the earthly plane.
Yeah. And it's different than Romeo and Juliet, where they, in a weird way, and I mean, like, this is coming from many years later from first having heard the story, but, like, it almost feels like you read the story, you're like, they're 14, they're really impetuous, like, they're making these foolish decisions to kill themselves without having any real understanding of the consequences.
Just trusting some friar in the woods, getting their timing all mixed up, and, like, they create their own tragedy.
Yeah, whereas he dies as a consequence of, like, this plan that they had shared, but just as a tragic side effect of it, and then she makes the deliberate act that this is the fate she chooses. So as tragic as it is, at least they made this with their eyes open and not being 14 years old, too dumb to live.
And in so much Shakespeare, like human faults and kind of misguided plans meet with like the irony of fate. So like you'll make a plan with best intentions and fate will intervene so that the plan goes wrong and fate steps in like in the right way to make your wrongness like extremely, narratively suitable. But here, like the plan was sound, the family's rationale was reasonable, and like everyone just acted in their best interests. It wasn't like the horse carts missed each other, you know, or like the letters didn't get there in time. Like it was, just not possible given the, the society they were living in.
Yes.
Sorry, I have a question really quick. Is there any sort of subtext to the story or like implied if she had just maintained in her place and had not like overstepped her female boundaries that like this tragedy wouldn't have happened?
It could be, right? Because I've grown up with these stories like third hand through movies and from my parents' retellings. But I find it difficult to think that's intended.
Right.
Because there's no way the story could have happened at all if she had ever stayed within her female boundaries.
He wasn't like their groundskeeper.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't like a cautionary tale because I feel like that would have taken away from the story.
I definitely feel like it isn't. I don't feel like I think the interesting thing about a lot of stories that I grew up with is that there isn't like a moral attached to this.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
It's complicated and sometimes sad.
Yeah, there's like nothing, like you hear the story, like what do you learn out of it? It's like everyone can sometimes do do their best and, as you said, act in their best interest in ways that make sense, and things can still end up in horrible configurations that are genuinely sad, that you look at it and you're like, this was sort of unavoidable, right? Like, there was nothing you could do about this. Well, maybe if she stayed in her proper female role, this wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't have met. But her mother was the one who was wanting, and her parents were the ones who agreed that she should go to this school. It's not like she ran away to do it. Right. She did it with their full consent and encouragement.
Yeah, and from the parents' point of view, they're like, well, you just had a dope education. Like, I'm so glad you had this great relationship, but, like, now we're back. You know, now we're, like, living our lives.
Focus up.
Yeah. And, you know, again, everyone's acting in their best interest, and shit's sad anyway.
Yeah. It was really interesting to me when I got to the States, and all the stories were like, everyone is alive at the end of this? Wait, people get married at the end of
You
love
can try
stories?
and it works? Like,
yeah, like this is all very simplistic to me.
One character died and he got trampled by wildebeest. Weird.
What are you guys referencing?
The Lion King, Amanda.
I haven't seen it since, like, 1995.
Oh, okay.
You need to revisit that, because there
probably.
is nothing like watching lions fall in love and being like, am I a furry? Like,
This is a furry now.
this is a little upsetting. Like, there's a scene where they're like making bedroom eyes at each other, and I was like, you're cats.
Like, why do I find Matthew Broderick as a lion hot?
It's just like it's really upsetting, because when you're an adult, you're like, these are animals.
Right, that's like everyone's like, wow, the animated Fox Robin Hood is really hot. I'm like, at least he's somewhat humanoid.
Right.
No, I think that one messed a lot of people
did.
up. Like, I think a lot of
Listen,
people.
guys, no judgment. If that's your thing, that's your thing. I'm just saying, not mine.
It's also problematically reinforced by Zootopia.
No,
yes,
I didn't.
that did make
Right?
it worse.
Nick Wilde is Foxy, and you're like,
Hey.
he's a cartoon fox.
I put that together.
Bad.
Put that together.
This is bad.
Oh boy, I have a feeling that media was very influential to your, like, imprinting on romantic
don't know.
objects.
I'm gonna show my hand as a 12-year-old anime fan.
Oh
for
my
a
god,
second.
yes, I want to hear this so
Linda is
much.
here for this.
Because this story sounds a lot like Ouran High School Host Club.
Like, this does not sound like Ouran High School Host Club at all.
But the beginning part where it's the
Yes,
cross-dressing and the scholarship student and them falling in love, even though one's a dude and one's a girl.
Also,
even though
she's the man.
She's totally gender fluid and it's awesome. But there's also, like, that idea of, like, sexuality and also difference, where she's the man doesn't have that so much. She's the man, there's no scholarship kid, and, you know,
the kind of class, right, the kind of class
Yeah.
dynamics aren't there. Julie and I did guest star on a fabulous podcast called Loose Canon, which is about, like, underappreciated movies that aren't in the film canon but should be, where we got mad deep into the gender roles in She's the Man.
She's the Man is a classic film that is
Yes.
truly underappreciated.
I so
100%
agree.
is.
I would love for you to listen to our episode and let us know what we missed. I walked in there with, like, 6 pages of cited notes.
We watched it.
We were
I
so
saw
ready.
Amanda taking notes as we were watching. I'm like, yes, into it.
I
so good.
I finally found my people. Like, I only know one other person who genuinely and unironically loves that movie.
It's fucking amazing.
It is just, chew like you have a secret is just one of, like, the greatest lines of my life.
It's Amanda Bynes in the perfect role, right? Like, physical comedy, a little bit soulful, funny, like, she's pure, like, and just, like, so into what it is that she's doing.
Like,
it's like
Channing
a perfect farce.
Tatum's simple dog humanity is
Yes.
like
baby
so
Channing Tatum.
perfect for that
Person
role.
golden retriever Channing Tatum.
Oh my god, it's
There's so much, like, good friend supporting. There's enough, like, you know, like, I don't know what it's called, situational, or not situational comedy, but, like, going in opposite doors, like, oh no, we're gonna find each other, like, running in and out, like, Boeing style or something.
Farce, I guess?
Yeah, I guess farcical.
also,
but,
like, one of the greatest, like, oh, now you can have a crush on her. Screw you guys, I hate high school.
Yes.
Oh, that is only
such
the
a good
best line ever.
like, it both is and respects and calls the fuck out of the, like, high school, like, dramedy you know, like, romance relationship movie.
Real good for an early 2000s movie.
the movie was #pure, and also
It was.
There was a little bit policing of bodies, but other than that, excellent movie.
Yes, there was a little bit, like, gender policing.
Yeah.
Other than, like, it was the early 2000s. Otherwise, they did pretty well.
Yeah.
Otherwise, David Cross meant well.
Yeah. Yeah.
You forgot he was in that for a second, didn't you?
my God.
Channing. We'll link our episode of Loose Cannon, but if
Also
nothing
in
else,
show notes.
if nothing else, folks, go watch She's the Man at your earliest convenience.
Please do.
And also, I will try to find the IMDb link to the 90s version of this movie, which I think is probably one of the better versions of the movie about the butterfly lovers.
Yeah.
So if anyone is interested, you can try to hunt that film down.
Were the butterflies red and white?
No, they were both this pale celadon green.
Ooh, were they like
New
Luna
grass?
Pardon?
Like
Matt said new grass. I said Luna moths because that's a thing.
I don't know what those are.
Oh, they're like these bright green, like butterflies, basically that have sort of like a long tail.
They don't have tails.
Okay.
It's probably like a very pale green.
I'll show you a picture of the Luna moth.
Okay,
yeah. Two things. One, I said new grass, like the kind of metaphor of like starting anew and like new plants and things.
That was cute.
Thank you. But also, Luna is the name of a wonderful YA novel by Julie Ann Peters about a transgender teenager, and one of the first books I ever read about like gender nonconforming and trans youth.
I think you gave that to me to read. I don't remember anything about it.
She wrote several really good books.
Was this recently?
Nope, it was in like the early aughts or mid aughts.
wow.
Julie Ann
Yeah,
Peters.
you were reading them early.
Yeah, there was like one LGBTQ shelf at our library, and I read the fuck
all
out
of
of that single shelf. Well, thank you so much, Linda, for coming and not depressing us exactly, but getting us interested in this like fundamental.
I was expecting a lot worse.
Story. Yeah, I was expecting like just like blood slaying all over the place,
No,
like
it's-
ruining bloodlines, curses.
It's less about gore when it comes to like what I call a very specific Chinese sadness. It's less about gore, and it's about this like deep knowing that you can never be truly happy.
His face
Look
right
at
now.
This is so.
She's just like, oh.
The
best way to describe it was
just crystallized right then.
It was a moment of existential sadness.
It is
just crossed your
it is
face.
the emotional equivalent of pressing on a bruise. That's the way that Chinese fiction should feel.
Well, on that note, listeners, stay creepy.
Stay cool.
Bye.
Spirits was created by Julia Shafini and me, Amanda McLaughlin. It's edited by Eric Schneider with music by Kevin MacLeod and visual design by Allison Wakeman.
Subscribe to Spirits on your preferred podcast app to make sure you never miss an episode. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Tumblr at Spirits Podcast.
On our Patreon page, patreon.com/spiritspodcast, you can sign up for exclusive content like behind-the-scenes photos, audio extras, director's commentary, blooper reels, and beautiful recipe cards with custom drink and snack pairings.
If you like the show, please share with your friends and leave us a review on iTunes. It really does help.
Thank you so much for listening. Till next time.